Hi class, this is Dr. Karsten, and today I'm going over lesson 9 for module 5, grade 4, EngageNY math. So today's lesson is going to be similar to our previous lessons because we are again going to be working on showing equivalence between two fractions. So again, that the value of the two fractions is the same. However, today, instead of decomposing fractions, we are actually going to be making our units larger. So we're going to be going the other direction. And before we can do that, I need to go over with you what that means to have a larger or smaller unit, because we really haven't discussed that so far. So let me go straight into an example. Let's compare 1/3 and 1/6. So these are not equivalent. To make them equivalent, this would have had to be 2/6. We know how to do that. But let's focus on comparing these two unit fractions. And the way I know that these are units is because they both have a 1 in the numerator. The numerator is the top number, the denominator is the bottom. The denominator represents the number of pieces or parts or units that one whole is broken up or divided equally into. The numerator is the number that we have. So let's first sketch out what 1/3 would look like. So I'm telling you that this is one whole, and I'm actually going to go ahead and just draw another one right underneath it that we're going to use for 1/6. So if I'm sketching out 1/3, I know that my denominator is 3, so this whole thing has to be split into 3 equal pieces, and I'm going to do the best I can. But for this one, I'm going to shade in 1. Because my numerator is 1, and that's the number I have, or the number that are shaded in. So this is 1/3. Now, if I were to show 1/6, the way that I would represent that is, instead of splitting it into 3 equal pieces, I'm going to split it into 6 equal pieces. And again, not showing equivalent fractions. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm just showing unit fractions here. I want to show the size of a unit, or one piece. A unit is just a piece. Okay, so now if I compare the size of 1/3 to the size of 1/6, what you should see is that 1/3 is much bigger or larger than 1/6. So I could go ahead and draw it like this. 1/3 is larger than 1/6. So what you should be noticing is that when the denominator is smaller, the size of a piece or of a unit is larger. But when the denominator is larger, is a bigger number, then the size of a unit or the size of a piece is much smaller. Let's do one more really quickly. Let's compare 1/4 and 1/2. And I'm just going to do this really quickly. I'm going to sketch out a couple of, so I'm telling you this is one whole, and I'm sorry, it looks a little wonky on the screen just because of the angle of where it is. Let me move it over a little, I'll straighten it out a little maybe. Okay, so now let's do 1/4 first. So I'm going to show 1/4. I have to split this into 4 equal parts or units. And I'm going to fill in one of them again. And I'll label that as 1/4. Now let's compare that to 1/2. So for 1/2, I'm just going to divide it in half. And I'm going to go ahead then and shade in the 1. So again, the 1 represents how many pieces I shaded in. And again, you can see that 1/2 is much bigger than 1/4 or a quarter. It takes up a lot more space out of the whole thing. It's much larger. If I were going to have a cookie, I would want to have a half of the cookie, not just a quarter or a fourth of the cookie. So now again, I can show this in a number sentence. So again, when the denominator is smaller, 2 is smaller than 4, the size of the unit gets larger. But when the denominator is a larger number, the size of the unit is smaller. And that's just because we're splitting it up into more pieces, so it makes sense. If you ever forget this on a quiz or a test, just go ahead and draw a quick sketch and see what the relationship is. Okay, so now we are ready to get into the actual lesson. Okay, so let's go back to what we would have done in Lesson 8 and review that really quickly before we get into Lesson 9. So in Lesson 8, and let's go back to my example of using 1/3. If I want to know what is an equivalent fraction for 1/3, we learned how to use multiplication, and we also learned how to use an area model to show this. So let's show this really quickly again. Let's sketch out an area model. And let's show 1/3. So again, the denominator tells me that I need 3 equal pieces, and that I need to shade in one of those to model a third. Now I show this on top by bracketing that off and showing my 1/3. So we decomposed these fractions, and if I want to, let's say, turn it into sixths, the thing that we asked ourselves was, how can I turn 3 into 6? And we said, okay, well, 3 times some number is equal to 6, or 6 divided by a number is equal to 3. And then we would figure out that that was 2. Or, sorry, we also did 6 divided by 3 is equal to the number we're looking for. Sorry, it's been a long day. So, the number we were looking for was times 2. And so then what we did was we knew that we had to split each of these units into 2 pieces. And you do that if you want to split it into 2 pieces, you're going to split it 1 time. If I want to split it into 4 pieces, I'd split it 3 times. And now I have 2 pieces, and this right here represents a denominator of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and a numerator of 1, 2. And so now we know that 1/3 is equal to 2/6. And then the way that we were showing this was to go ahead and write our original fraction, 1/3 is equal to, and then we said 1/3 times, and we have to multiply by the same thing on the top and the bottom, so that's just like multiplying by 1, we know this. So we multiplied by 2. And we got 2/6, because 1 times 2 is 2, and 3 times 2 is 6. So today, it's going to be a little different because we are going to be starting with the 2/6. So let's model that. So for today, our drawings are going to first model what we're starting with, which is the smaller sized units. We're going to start with 2/6. And we can see that. So here I've modeled 2/6 for us. So what we want to do now, though, is we are going to make this into smaller pieces, or sorry, we're going to make the denominator a smaller number by making the pieces larger. And what I can see here is, I'm going to circle this out, I can take my columns here and make it 1 column, 2 columns, 3 columns. So we're starting with 2/6, and now what I can see is that I could turn this into thirds. That is something that I could do for this one. And what I'm doing is I am making groups of 2 to do that, because you can see I have 2 pieces in each one of these groups. So here's a group of 2, 1, 2, here's a group of 2, 1, 2, and here's a group of 2, 1, 2. So really what I did was, when you make these groups, the size of your groups, that's what you're dividing by today. And that goes back to here, where we were talking about dividing. So now I took my 6 and I divided it by 2, and whatever I do on the top, I have to do on the bottom. And we know that. So if I divide by 2, I get 1 on top. So if you see, I do have 1/3 because I have 3 groups, 1, 2, 3, and one of them is shaded. You're just looking at the columns. Again, we're going backwards today. So you can see that I have 3 groups and 1 is shaded. Now the way that I could model this is just how we did it for multiplication, only it's going to start with the 2/6, and that's going to be my beginning, and now I'm going to divide by 2 over 2. And that is going to give me 1/3. So let's go ahead and jump into the problem set, which I have here waiting for us. And let's take a look at some of these problems that we're doing today. And then it'll make more sense. Remember, the first time it's confusing, the second time kind of getting it. It's usually at the third or fourth problem that you'll really understand it. Okay, so here is our problem set for today. Let me get everything lined up for us, and we'll jump into problem B. Okay, so in this problem, actually let me scooch it down for us a little bit so we can read the instructions together. So here it says, compose the shaded fractions into larger fractional units. So now you see we're using, instead of decomposing, we're composing the shaded fractions into larger fractional units. Express the equivalent fractions in a number sentence using division. And then they did the first one for us. But we already did one, so let's jump right into this problem over here. So I'm just going to center it a little for us so we can work with it. So the first thing I need to do is figure out what is this fraction? What is my denominator? What is my numerator? So I'm going to go ahead and figure that one out. Now remember, the denominator is the number of pieces that make up the whole. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's my original denominator that I'm starting with. And my numerator is the number of pieces that I have, or the number that are shaded. So for this one, I have 1, 2, 3. So I'm setting everything up for us. So they didn't tell us what we're going to turn it into, but again, the technique that we're using today is that we're going to circle groups. And here, I'm going to look at my columns. Columns go up and down, rows go side to side or horizontally. So let's look at these columns. And I can do the same thing that we did before. I can circle this one, and I can circle this one. And when I do that, what you can see is that I have two groups now. One group, another group. And that one of my groups is shaded. So now what I can do is I can figure out that my new denominator is going to be 2 because I have one group, two group, I have 2 circles. I've done that. And what we did was we made groups of 3 this time because I have 1, 2, 3 here and 1, 2, 3 in this group. That lets me know that really what I did was I divided by 3. When you make groups this way, you're really dividing by 3. So now I'm going to start with my original one, 3, 6. I'm going to show that I divided by 3. And whatever you do in the numerator, you have to do in the denominator and vice versa. And now what I can also see is that if I have 2 groups, 1, 2, that one of them is shaded. Okay, I know. Still confused. That was only the second example. Let's do a third one. So let's take a look at C. So for problem C, again, we're going to be composing this time. So we're going from the smaller units to the larger units. Just like when you write a composition, you go from all the little facts, you put them all together to make one big composition. So let's go ahead and figure out what is our original fraction here. So we need to know the denominator. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is my denominator. It's the number of pieces that make up one whole. And then I need to figure out how many are shaded. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this represents 5/10. I'm going to go ahead and set up my number sentence. I know I'm starting with 5/10. I know that we are composing, so I'm dividing because I want to make larger units. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to circle my columns. It's a nice, easy way for us to do this. So I have one column, and I have another column. And when I look this, what I just did was I made groups of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 5 in this group, so I made one group of 5. Here I made another group of 5. So I have 2 groups of 5, so I'm going to put a 2 in my new denominator, and one of those is shaded. So I have 1/2, and you can look, this is half the drawing. That's kind of easy to look at. So what did we do? If we made groups of 5, it means that we divided the entire thing by 5. So we divided the denominator of 10 by 5 to get 2, and we divided our numerator, which was the number that we had. We had 5 originally, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We divided it by 5 to turn it into one single group. All right, so we just composed them into larger fractional units. And if I were just to take this, just to make it even more clear, and redraw it as 1/2, it would look like this. Wrong pencil. There we go. So do you see how these two match? The same amount is shaded in. So I'm going to let you, for part of your classwork today, your work at home, is you're going to work on D, but I'm going to show you another one. So let me flip the page and let's go into another problem. So I definitely want to give you samples of the rest of the work that you're going to be doing. So let's take a look at problem 2, and we will read the question together. Let me just get us all lined up. I feel like we're a little crooked here. I must have bumped it at some point. So there we go. So it says, compose the shaded fractions into larger fractional units. Express the equivalent fractions in a number sentence using long division. All right, so let's take a look at, and let me say this. Don't stress over these little question marks. Just do what you've been doing. Don't stress over it. Okay. So let's jump into one of these. Let's maybe go and do C together. So if I'm taking a look at C, remember the first thing, I'm going to shut this up for us. The first thing that I'm going to do is I need to figure out what is my original equation for this one. If I look at this one, my original equation, my denominator is going to be the number of pieces that the whole thing was split up into, the number of parts or units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And my numerator is going to be 1, 2, because that's the number of pieces that I started out with, that I have, that are shaded. All right, so now for this one, I'm starting with 2/10. I'm going to divide by something. Whatever I divide by in the numerator has to be the same in the denominator. And we need to figure out what we're going to turn this into. Now, the easy way that we're doing this today is we can easily see our columns here. So I can go ahead and I can group them that way. So I have 1 column, 2 columns, 3 columns, 4 columns, 5 columns. So now what I have is, instead of having 10 pieces, I have 5 groups, or 5 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to go ahead and make that my new denominator. And out of those 5 circles, or 5 groups that I made, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, one of them is shaded. Now each one of these groups is a group of 2. 1, 2. Here's a group of 2. 1, 2. So what I really did was, I took these and I divided by 2. And when I did that, I got 1/5, because 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So there we composed the shaded fractions into a larger fractional unit. All right, so now let's go ahead and let me see which one I want us to go over next. Okay, so let's take a peek at question 3, because that's going to be a little different. So when we take a look, we're going to do question 3A together, and then I'm going to let you guys do 4 on your own. So it says, in the first area model, show 2/6, and the second area model, show 3/9. Then it says, show how the fractions can be renamed as the same unit fraction. So in the first area model, if I'm going to show 2/6, what I want to remember is that I'm going to want this, my numerator, to make up one entire column. And I know that because we are turning things into unit fractions. So I'm going to want to have my groups, and I'm going to have one of my groups shaded since I want unit fractions. So that's why I really wanted to show you this, was to really emphasize what we're doing here. So I'm going to go ahead and straight off the bat, I'm going to split this like this. So I divided the whole thing in half so that I'd be able to put 2 here. And I know I need a total of 6, so I'm going to do what I've been doing. We should be pretty comfortable by now to do it like this. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that matches my denominator. And then I'm going to go ahead and shade in 2 of those. So again, I just showed 2, 6 right here. So this is the one for 2, 6. So I'm going to go ahead and write 2, 6 here. Sorry, I had to figure out where I wanted to put it. Now I'm going to be composing that. And they say that I have to turn it into a unit fraction. So I know I'm going to have to turn that into a 1. Can you guys start to think of what we might do here, what I'm showing you? So now let's go ahead and take this one, and let's do the first step, which is to show 3/9. So again, because I know that I want to have this modeled so that I can have 3 of those in a column, I'm going to go ahead and draw it like this. And then I'm going to go ahead and split each one of these into 3 pieces so that I could have 3 in that column. And I'm going to shade that column in. And now I have modeled 3/9. Now again, they're telling me that I have to make a unit fraction. Can you guys start to think about what we were doing before when we wanted to turn things into things? What I know is that I need to turn 2/6 into 1 something because they want a unit fraction. A unit has a 1. What would I have to divide 2 by to turn it into a 1? Jot that down. I'm running out of room, so let me slide this down a little so I have a little room to work up here. So I'm asking myself, 2 divided by what number is equal to 1? Well, remember that we can actually flip these and say 2 divided by 1 will give me that number. And if I do that, 2 divided by 1 is just 2. And whatever I do to my numerator, I must do to my denominator. So that's the math way that we're going to be moving into doing that. I'm just showing you that because I know that we've already been doing that going the other direction. But the other thing we can do is now we can go ahead and circle our groups of 2, our columns. So I have 1, 2, 3 groups, and one of them is shaded in. So I have 1/3. And how did we do that? We made groups of 2, or we divided by 2. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So again, I have 3/9, and I'm going to turn that into something with a 1 in the numerator because it's a unit fraction. What do I have to divide 3 by to turn it into a 1? So I know that. Do I have room here? I'll do it up here. 3 divided by some number is 1, or 3 divided by 1 is equal to that number. And in this case, it's going to be a 3 in both spots. And so I could actually mathematically just do this right now. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Let's see if that works over here when we do it the way we're doing it today, which is that I circle 1, another group, and another group. And these are groups of 3, because I have 1, 2, 3 pieces in each one of those groups. So now I have 1, 2, 3 groups, and 1 is shaded in. And the way we did that was dividing it into groups of 3, which is the same thing as dividing by 3. Okay, so you've gotten a little bit of a preview of where we are going and how we're going to do this. And I'm showing you the way that makes it easier to do it mathematically when you know what you want to turn it into. You are going to have to be really solid in your multiplication and division, so I hope that everyone is doing their fast facts. I'll make sure I put that on the agenda. And I will see you in our Google Classroom today. All right, have a great day. Bye.